Hey guys, welcome back to Gatsu Gaming. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Frost Mage. I had a couple requests for Mage, so I figured, you know what, let's check out Mage. So I'm sitting here on beta. This character's actually only 110, but I did extensive dungeon testing with these guys before they went from alpha to beta, and not much has changed for Frost Mage. So I figured it'd be alright to go ahead and evaluate Frost Mage at this point, with the experience I have so far, and then the couple of dungeons I've run since everything changed over here into beta. So, the talents have changed a little bit. A few have been moved around here in the Mage talent tree. Of course, we're going to ignore PvP talents here if I have the wrong ones selected because you're a Frost Mage, main back on live. Don't worry about this. I was just kind of messing around. I decided to level in War mode, which is a really good way, I think, whenever we go live. But here we have just the basic talents I was leveling with. Go ahead and start here in the level 15 row, as we always do. So we still have Bone Chilling. Whenever you attempt to chill a target, you gain Bone Chilling, increasing spell damage you deal by 0.5% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. So this is essentially, whenever you're playing, purely single target and you don't need the pet or you don't want the pet, Bone Chilling, of course, is a great option. Gives you 5% increased damage pretty quickly, because most of your effects will apply a chill. This is, pretty much the standard, easy-to-go, passive, don't have to worry about it option, and it works quite well, and it does exactly what you want it to do. Lonely Winter, of course, gets rid of your summon Water Elemental. You can't summon your Water Elemental, but Frostbolt, Ice Lance, and Flurry deal 20% increased damage. This is probably going to be your go-to right away. It's a huge makeup for stats, so whenever you're gearing up, this is going to be huge. You also don't have to worry about your pet potentially pulling extra things when you're, starting out those dungeons where you don't exactly know all the pulls, which is definitely a huge help. I know this has been pretty much the go-to in Legion, because it just simply outperformed every other option. It very well may continue to do so, but of course we haven't hit tuning just yet, so we'll have to see. But this one remains very, very strong, and I've actually enjoyed it even soloing, because even though I don't have the pet, being able to kite for days is pretty awesome. New to this row, I believe, is Ice Nova. Causes a whirl of icy wind around the target, causing frost damage to the target, and frost damage to all other enemies within 8 yards, and freezing them in place for 2 seconds. Think of this as basically your... I believe this is actually what the Frost Elemental or Water Elemental has, more or less. Pretty similar to that. This is incredibly good. I know a bunch of people that PvP and swear by this thing. So, definitely still has its place, definitely still quite useful. I personally just don't like having a million extra buttons, so I just run Lonely Winter. The level 30 row here, this is our defensive / movement row. It's kind of an awkward row, honestly. Glacial Insulation, Ice Barrier increases your armor by 200% while active, and Ice Block applies Ice Barrier to you when it fades. This is a standard defensive option here. I've been using it just because I end up using Ice Barrier constantly, and of course I'm face tanking a lot of things because I don't have the Water Elemental, and occasionally you're just gonna get surrounded and the armor isn't bad. Shimmer gives you 2 charges of Blink, unaffected by global cooldown and castable while casting. Pretty cool to be able to blink and continue casting and everything else and, not get interrupted. It's really fun. Again, I'm just using Glacial Insulation because it's completely passive, and I'm used to it at this point, but Shimmer, of course, is incredibly strong, and is typically the go-to as far as I know. Unless, of course, you want Ice Flows, which is also an amazing ability here. Gives you casting while moving for the next 3 spells, I believe. Very, very good. Really great whenever you're casting that real big glacial spike and you are forced to move. 45 row here, this is our sort of DPS augment row. We got Incanter's Flow. This is the one I've been using the most, just because, again, completely passive, don't have to worry about positioning, I don't have to worry about anything else goofy going on. It just fluctuates between 4% to 20% increased damage. It cycles automatically, don't even have to think about it. pretty awesome, especially whenever you're just going to be constantly moving around and you can't make use of Rune of Power, or if Mirror Image is just not worth using in your case, which right now in beta, whenever I played with it, Mirror Image gets you 3 copies for 40 seconds of yourself. They cast spells and attack your enemies. While this is useful on live for a couple of situations, unfortunately on beta it felt very, very weak, and my clones died almost immediately. So I'm not sure if that's just a weird scaling bug or what, but this is unusable at the moment for me. I'm sure that'll be fixed very shortly whenever they hit tuning passes. And of course, Rune of Power still gives you that 40% 8-yard circle where you deal extra damage. Great for your burst windows, especially useful whenever you've got all your cooldowns up. You can hit like an absolute freight train with Rune of Power. If you can make use of this, this is definitely the best talent in this row. But of course, if there's a lot of movement, it's very difficult to make proper use of it. Level 60 row here, this is a very awkward row. So we have Frozen Touch. Frostbolt grants you Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze 20% more often. This just gives you a 20% buff to your proc rates off of Frostbolt. Now that is not an additional 20%, it is 20% on top of what the baseline chance is, which is a common misconception. If it was just 20% more, you would only take this talent. So whatever that chance actually is, add 20% to it. Chain Reaction, your Ice Lances against frozen targets increase your damage of your Ice Lances by 3% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. I believe this is one of the artifact traits, if I'm not mistaken. Very, very powerful, but I really just preferred to have Ebon Bolt. Ebon Bolt is one of those abilities that I think a lot of us very much fell in love with during Legion in general, and it's going to be very strange to not have. 2-second cast, 45-second cooldown, launches a bolt of ice at the enemy, dealing 31-14 frost damage and granting you Brain Freeze. Now, Brain Freeze, of course, is that amazing proc to go ahead and fling out that flurry. It's invaluable to have that. It's very rare that you won't take Ebon Bolt, as far as I can tell. Most mages I have seen playing in the beta so far have been running Ebon Bolt, and it's of course not very surprising at all. It is just one of those abilities that is just so useful, and at this point such a staple, it'll be hard to not choose it. So 75 here, we've got Frigid Winds. All your chilling effects reduce the target's movement speed by an additional 15%. I took this one, of course, because it's just a passive, and that extra movement speed helps me kite a little bit better. Ice Ward, Frost Nova has 2 charges, good for whenever you need to get away from things. Especially useful in PvP, where having extra Frost Novas can be incredibly strong. And of course, Ring of Frost, that big icy circle on the ground that freezes and incapacitates things. Never a bad choice whenever you can make use of it. Just not my cup of tea, because I very rarely pool big enough that I need to use it. Now, level 90 tier, they moved Comet Storm up into this, which is a good place for it, to be honest. But this is mostly our AoE row. So Freezing Rain, Frozen Orb makes Blizzard instant cast and increases its damage done by 35% for 12 seconds. I believe this is also an artifact trait that has been shifted over to the talent tree. An excellent thing to come back here, that was actually one of the most enjoyable things about the Frost Mage Tower challenge for me, was being able to utilize Frozen Orb into multiple Blizzards. It's not baseline, but that's okay. We still have the option for it, and it is always a good option. Anytime you, of course, want to use Blizzard. I think the standard, though, is probably going to be Splitting Ice. Your Ice Lance and Icicles now deal 5% increased damage, and hit a second nearby target for 80% of their damage. Your Ebon Bolt and Glacial Spike now also hit a second nearby target for 80% of its damage. Now, this is an incredibly powerful talent. The fact that it adds Ebon Bolt and Glacial Spike to that means that anytime you've got 2-target cleave, this is the only talent you can pick, for sure. 80% of the damage of Ebon Bolt and Glacial Spike being flung at the target? Sign me up. And that's also why I picked it. Comet Storm, of course, is just that fire and forget. AoE. Incredibly good whenever you're AoE pulling, of course. And up a little more consistently than the buffs from Freezing Rain. Not the greatest of abilities, but it definitely does a little more damage here on beta than it currently does on live. Now, the last row has been changed a little bit. You'll notice that Ray of Frost, which used to be a level 15 talent, is now a 100 row talent, and I picked it, which is kind of a crazy idea to some people, but trust me, it's pretty good. So Thermal Void is still here. Icy Veins duration is increased by 10 seconds, and your Ice Lances against frozen targets extend your Icy Veins by an additional 1 second. Still very strong. Very well could be the stronger, pick after numbers go in. But right now I'm preferring Ray of Frost. Channel an Icy Beam at the enemy for 4.1 seconds, dealing frost damage every 0.8 seconds and slowing movement by 75%. Each time Ray of Frost deals damage, its damage and snare increase by 10%. It also generates 2 charges of Fingers of Frost over its duration. Now, the reason I picked this talent is because I thought, hey, they moved it from 15 to 100. That's got to do pretty good damage, right? Well, let me tell you, it does an insane amount of damage right now in beta. I'm not sure if it's because of how they scaled it or not, but this thing hits like a truck, and it is very impressive. Also, getting those 2 Fingers of Frost charges definitely really help Frost be competitive and get those reliable procs it needs to put out big numbers, especially during that Icy Veins window. And then Glacial Spike, of course, is still here. Glacial Spike is that wonderful meme spec that a lot of people like to play. I was never a huge fan of it because I actually like my Icicles actually doing things. But this, of course, is really good whenever you need that targeted burst. It conjures a massive spike of ice, shoves all your Icicles into it, and hits your target for a ton of frost damage. Plus all the damage stored in your Icicles. It freezes the target in place for 4 seconds as well. Damage can interrupt that freeze effect, though, and shatter it. Requires 5 Icicles to cast, as it normally does, and of course, when paired with Splitting Ice, will also hit another target for 80% of the damage. Glacial Spike plus Splitting Ice is really scary. Really scary. The amount of burst this ability does is pretty insane. If I weren't soloing so much, I would definitely be taking Glacial Spike with probably would be taking that with Ebon Bolt and Splitting Ice and going with that wonderful big ol' smack. Especially if you can stand there with Rune of Power and get even more damage out of it. So in our spellbook, not much has changed. We do have the wonderful inclusion of Arcane Intellect here. It's a 10% Intellect buff for the entire raid. This is going to be invaluable. You're going to want at least 1 mage in every group, kind of like you're going to want at least 1 priest and 1 warrior just for those buffs in your raids, which honestly, if you don't have those classes in your raid, it's actually a little unusual at this point. Every class and spec looks pretty solid so far. There doesn't seem to be anything that's, really terrible. And I don't think having these buffs in general in raids is going to be too difficult to find this expansion. And I'm very glad to see some sort of buffs come back, because honestly, my buff bars felt a little small. Minus the flask, food, rune, and everything else that I had to have all the time. So we have Arcane Intellect here. Same cast, just gives you that little buff there. Blink, still have Blink, of course. Good mobility, gets rid of all your stuns, snares, etc. We still have Blizzard. This is affected by haste, as you can see by the green cooldown on it. That indicates that it is affected by haste. Still have Cold Snap here, resets cooldown of Ice Barrier, Frost Nova, Cone of Cold, and Ice Block. Cone of Cold is an 85% snare, which is an incredibly huge snare considering everyone else's have been severely nerfed, giving Frost Mages pretty much the only massive snare like that in the game right now, especially since it lasts for a full 5 seconds. It's actually quite impressive. Conjure Refreshment here. The same thing here. If you're in a group, it'll drop a table for you. Otherwise, it just makes you your own stack of food. Counterspell still on a 24-second cooldown. Ebon Bolt here is a talent. Flurry. Throw that Flurry out there again. 85% movement speed reduction, of course, because I have the extra 15% from a talent. So I believe it's actually 70% snare. So Cone of Cold 70% snare, excuse me. While Brain Freeze is active, Flurry applies Winter's Chill, causing your target to take damage from your spells as if it were frozen. Of course, allowing you to get those huge Ice Lance crits. Frost Nova here, of course, is that good snare. Well, root, actually. Frostbolt is our standard. It has a 50% snare baseline. Frozen Orb also has a 50% snare tied to it and generates Fingers of Frost when it first damages an enemy. Have our Ice Barrier here, which is roughly 6,200 damage shield, and anybody that attacks you, of course, gets a 50% snare as well. Still have Ice Block. It's a 4-minute cooldown now. I'm not sure if the duration is lowered currently with artifact weapons, but it is at a 4-minute cooldown here in BFA. Have our Ice Lances here. Ice Lance, of course, does triple damage against frozen targets, which is why it's so important to make things are frozen. Icy Veins, 30% haste, and prevents anything from delaying your spellcasts. Invisibility is a quick way to get out of combat, get away from things that are a little too scary whenever we pull too much. But of course, taking any action will cancel that effect, so it also lets you sneak past things in Mythic Plus. Still have Polymorph, works on beasts, humanoids, and critters. It will also force things to regenerate health very quickly, so of course not the most useful sometimes. Of course, you have portals and teleports still. Remove Curse. This is actually going to be incredibly useful this expansion because there's lots of curses, and having a decurse in your group is actually going to be a very important thing. Having Purges in the case of Spell Steal, which still costs a ton of mana. I currently have 20,000 mana at 110, and this requires 4,200, which is a fifth of your mana pool. So again, huge amount of mana for Spell Steal, but of course you steal that beneficial magic effect instead of letting, a monster run around with it instead. So hopefully you can pull off a 30% damage buff from one of the, I believe it's an Incubator, Incubator mob in the Temple of Sithralis, and get a 30% damage buff for however long that lasts for. Definitely useful whenever you can actually get a huge buff out of it. Otherwise, expect to be very quickly. But yes, remove Curse, which actually isn't on my bar. Oops. It's on a bar now. Very useful right now. Still have Slow Fall, which I haven't seen anything where I can use it in any dungeons so far. But of course, I'm sure we'll find some kind of goofy pathing to take somewhere that'll let us utilize it. We still have our Time Warp, which is 30% haste for all party and raid members for 40 seconds. Always one of the best things to use anytime you need that extra bit of damage. We won't have the ring anymore, the Shard of the Exodar, to give us a double hero anymore. But, of course, will always be good for Mythic Plus, because who doesn't want Time Warp? The only few things we have here left, of course, are Brain Freeze. Frostbolt has a 25% chance to empower your next flurry to be instant cast, deal 50% increased damage, and apply Winter's Chill to the target. Winter's Chill causes everything to take damage as if it were frozen. Fingers of Frost. Frostbolt has a 15% chance, and Frozen Orb has a 10% chance to grant a charge of Fingers of Frost. Fingers of Frost causes your next Ice Lance to deal damage as though the target were frozen, max 2 charges. Icicles is the mastery. Casting Frostbolt or Flurry grants you an Icicle. Casting Ice Lance causes all Icicles stored to begin launching at the target, each dealing 635 frost damage at this level. Up to 5 Icicles can be stored. Any excess Icicles gained will be automatically launched. And it increases the damage of Frozen Orb by 45% in my case, because I have 23% Mastery. So it looks like that just scales up a good bit more than I thought it did. And then, of course, we've got Shatter. Multiplies the critical strike chance of your spells against frozen targets by 1.5, and that's additional 50% crit chance. Always a very fun thing to have, for sure. And then, for some reason, Portal Stormwind is chilling here by itself. I'm not sure why. Probably just a beta bug. There's a lot of those, of course, sitting around, because it is beta. But that's about all I have to say about Frost Mage. It's been very fun to play. It retains pretty much the same general speed that it had in Legion. Of course, the only things that have changed, really, are the inclusion of the Azerite armor pieces, which the only one I have to show you here because I haven't completed a zone on this character just yet, is Iceland deals additional damage and reduces the cooldown of Frozen Orb with this passive, which is called Whiteout, which I believe is a trait in one of the in the Frost weapon on live. I may be mistaken, but most of the Azerite traits have been something similar to this for Mage, augmenting your primary abilities, doing a little bit more damage here and there, and just buffing your damage in general, which is definitely very welcome, because there was a lot of concerns that these would just be kind of boring utility or, you know, random stat increases that no one asked for. So that's all I have for Frost Mage. If you liked the video, be sure you toss me a like there. Be sure you subscribe to the channel so you can be updated whenever I release even more of these videos, because there's plenty more to come. And I'll see you in the next video, which is probably going to be Fire Mage or Arcane Mage, because I'm on a roll. Catch you guys later. Bye!